And it is useful, I think, as we reason through this extraordinary act of keeping uh, a member of parliament or two members of parliament in detention without conclusion of a trial, in punitive detention, I must say. So this is not an argument of what Sikhala said, did not say, and what this amounts to. It's an argument about the law of bail, as many lawyers have drawn our attention to, and the right to liberty. 100 days in detention is equivalent to a custodial sentence in some offenses already. And to be detained without trial for this length of time, more so when one is a legislator, is in itself punitive. But this punitive action could be seen purely as petty. But it is useful for us to, in our inquiry, as we reflect on this, to see this as strategic. This may be a preemptive strike, that there is a positioning within Zanu PF to try and capture Chitungwiza, as happened in some portions of Seke and Epworth. And to do this is by getting out of the way a strong character like Sikhala, who has strong following on the ground. In essence, it is the understanding is that if you compromise or if you inhibit him from standing, and indeed you call an election, as some people have speculated might be done, Sikhala will not be in the running. Without Sikhala in the running, I think the anticipation is that there will be confusion within the oppositional ranks, and that this would benefit certain political interests and parties outside of the Sikhala's own party. So I think the first thing to reflect on is that the travesty of his detention, its illegality, its absurdity, its violation of basic international legal standards and basic human rights standards, its violation of the intention and the spirit of the 2013 Constitution would be spectacularly reprehensible if it were not linked to a political strategy and an impending election. So as those of us who are calling Sikhala a political prisoner and demanding his release, we did note, not with any surprise, Dr. Maduku's submission that that this indeed is a political matter. But I think that what Zimbabweans ought to do, without dismissing Maduku or agreeing with him, is to ask, if this is a political matter, what is the political about the matter? Or what is political about it? And dig a little deeper in understanding what the strategic intent is and what this is seen, or the significance of such strategic action on the part of those that are keeping him in detention. That said, the continued detention of folks who are accused of crimes such as the one in this case, and the lack of any serious I think, attention to those who are accused on the ruling party side of perpetrating all forms of violence, including in instances where the opposition has alleged that the murder of its supporters has been perpetrated by ruling party activists, come criminals, and such persons have not been arrested, sends a chilling message to voters that the law operates only in favor of one political party, that the arm of the law is indeed partisan. Never mind all the things that have been said about perceptions about the judiciary, about perceptions about the investigatory part and the prosecutorial part of our law enforcement. It therefore means that the reflections we are having about not just the election, but the state of democracy in Zimbabwe, not just about the state of democracy, but the state of human rights. Not just about the state of human rights, but the net outcome of the liberation struggle. Are reflections which must take us to understanding certain things. If you can deal this way with a member of parliament, how are women being dealt with in communities that have become essentially closed? How are people who don't have a name being dealt with in police cells and other informal and formal detention centers. This serves to remind us that the vigilance with which we must not only stand up with these colleagues, but everybody else who's held in similar circumstances is a national obligation, not just for political parties and civil society organizations, but for every Zimbabwean of goodwill. Today it is Sikhala, tomorrow it may be you. And this is happening whether or not there is an election in the horizon. This is happening because impunity has become entrenched. And for reasons that Ibo, Mandaza, Dr. Mandaza, and others have cited, and my sister Tsitsi, it is happening because I think many of us think it is short-term and it will pass away. We think it is because a particular victim has done something in particular. Tsitsi was arrested while standing outside. She did not break, beat up, or was not even accused of any violence. Holding a placard expressing her rights has meant that she's inconvenienced by having to report to police stations and being charged nefariously for committing an offense. And if one juxtaposes these two extreme cases, I dare not mention your own, Hopewell. I think that what it must say to Zimbabweans is that whilst it is not the conditions are not ideal for any election at all, in the absence of any other credible, sustainable, doable set of actions, I think that what Dr. Mandaza has suggested, what I've heard other people call for, is absolutely urgent. What's urgent is that you cannot have a divided house of pro-democracy forces, be they civic or political, approaching an election nonchalantly, not clear about how to leverage their respective strengths. This is not at all to suggest that we must force either Nelson Chamisa or any of the opposition political parties into a marriage of convenience where there is no alignment in terms of vision, in terms of principle, because that would be as spectacularly tragic as not being in an alliance. But I think that what all of us believe is that a fragmented pro-democracy platform or set of platforms will simply assure the status quo of a victory. The second thing is that this should no longer be seen as the business of political parties only. The defense of freedom is an obligation for every ZANU-PF member of parliament. It's an obligation for every MDC member of parliament, and indeed for every citizen. So if there's a clarion call many of us are making, it is that Sikhala must be released. He must be released because Sikhala is a citizen. He must be released because the law requires that he be released on bail. Sikhala must be released because we cannot use the law to settle political difference and political scores. And because if this is about constraining and restraining violent conduct, then the state must be seen to act even-handedly and apprehend everyone accused of violence, including within the ruling party's own by-elections. If violence within the ruling party's own by-elections reported in newspapers did not, even when it was repeat offenses, attract 100-day detention or more for those accused of such violence, then there exists no reason, there exists no justification for any claim that the purpose and the intention of this unacceptable action is to enforce any law. It is purely to defend political interest, and we must unmask it for what it is. And this is the type of action that undermines Zimbabwe's standing in the international community and undermines any seriousness with which any reform post the Mugabe moment can be transacted. It is in bad faith, and to make the law subject to the ego of one megalomaniac tendencies of any individual is totally unacceptable. I'll leave it at this, but I wanted us, Hopewell, to reflect on this is not accidental arrest and detention, it's punitive. It is not just punitive. I'm suggesting to you that it's strategic. And it's high time all of us asked, what then is the strategy? for doing this, and in particular to Job Sikhala and others.
Thank you very much, my brother Brian. I want to ask one or two questions, and then I'll open it up again. So, what needs to be done now? What are the solutions that can be used either by citizens or by Job's political party, Triple C? What do you think can be done?
I think first and foremost, the citizens must do what they have done with the petition. But take this: I am a great believer that as frustrating as the Southern African process and African Union processes are, and as captured as some of those spaces need to be, we record this for posterity and for history. That Zimbabwean citizens unanimously demand that we should not bring back the ghost of Rhodesia that detained Mugabe for 10 years and other nationalists for daring to with the Rhodesian state. So I think that the petition appealing to those who still have conscience, and there may not be many within the SADC region, both within the state, in the private sector, and elsewhere, and those within the broader African community is important. I think the second thing is that direct action must be taken, peaceful, lawful, constitutional action, including court action by his own party. And I think there are several options that arise, and I don't want to be litigating strategy on the Twitter space. And I think that it's no longer what the state has been good at, Opwell, is to define our friends for us and define our enemies for us. Because you can say this person is like this and create the incentive for others not to associate with such a person because they've been stigmatized or criminalized. And if you allow the state to do this in circumstances where you yourself fully understand that this is a made-up story, this is a ruse, you open yourself to being torn apart, to being picked apart one by one. So it is absolutely important. We saw this happen to Tendai BT during the 2018 election with that Zambia debacle. We've seen this happen to several other people, to Sikhala even before. I think it is a high time we determined how you treat official opposition in a democratic country, or a country that says it's a democracy. And that's quite separate from our anti-imperial, anti-colonial positions. I think we owe ourselves a standard, a set of standards and a set of principles. Otherwise, governance with no principle, that's based purely on power and brawn, will land us in a place that's much darker than where 2018 took us.
Thank you very much, Brian. And in terms of you spoke about strategy, that this could be strategic for the state or for Zanu PF to make sure that the potent members of the opposition that are coming from constituencies which are being targeted are incarcerated, are inside, or they're given convictions so that they don't run. What can the opposition do to deal with it? Obviously, the courts are captured. What can the opposition do? A lot of people have been saying on the streets that the opposition needs to do something. What can it do?
You know, the opposition can still vote for Sikhala. As long as there's no conviction, nothing will enable the state to disqualify him. And what I think others are hoping for is that the opposition will go into panic, dump Sikhala in anticipation that Sikhala may not be able, to go past the threshold that's being set. But I think as a statement of conscience, forces within the opposition need to align themselves and stand behind their own leadership. If there are matters that they wish to settle with Honorable Sikhala, let them do it within their own house according to their own procedures. But to the extent that he is a prominent member of theirs, they must show that they are behind him. This must not be left to ordinary party members to act emotively, because this may play into the hands of those who have detained Sikhala. The litigation of this matter, taking up this cause, must be done by the formal leadership of the opposition. If there's no office bearers by the known faces of the opposition, so that the action is led and it is known who is leading it. It doesn't have to be Sikhala, but someone amongst the senior membership of the opposition has to take this up. They cannot leave this to Honorable Temba Mliswa. They cannot leave this. It is good to get solidarity from many people, but I think that they need to stand up for one of their own. We commend those who have stood up for him. Beyond the prison visits, I think they need to understand that the sacrifice of Sikhala has consequences for them. And those consequences mean it's each man for himself. And they have to be able to not allow such impunity to reign, fear within their rank and file, but also they should not allow such impunity to divide them.
Thank you very much, Brian. Brighton, please go ahead. Is it a comment or question? Brighton, can you hear me? Your microphone is off.
Yes, I can hear you, Hope.
Please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity, Hope. Well, I also want to take this opportunity to salute you, salute Dr. Ibo Mandaza and our wonderful, amazing author there, Titi, for sterling contributions to fighting for democracy in Zimbabwe, and obviously a very, very brutal dictator. I would like to say that I've quite taken in a lot of the very valuable contributions that have been made, including by my brother there, Brian Kagore, as well. Very, powerful, and significant contributions there. My understanding of the Zimbabwean situation really is that although we've got laws and the constitution and pretty much all of that architecture, the reality of the situation is that we've got unwritten norms and in courts an unwritten constitution, that the regime thrives on, using as a tool, as a repressive tool. What I mean by that is that essentially the regime picks and chooses moments when it adheres to the rule of law and constitutionalism, etc. Now, what it does very well, and what we've seen from the Mugabe days, which this regime has now shamelessly continued, is a path of using brute force, bare knuckle brute force, as it were, to criminalize opposition politics. And the method in that approach is in ensuring that the population is cowed and they're terrified into openly expressing dissent against this regime. We all remember the said events of the 1st of August 2018. We've seen and internalized those images of army personnel crouching at a 45-degree angle and shooting at unarmed civilians who were peacefully demonstrating, and they were fleeing at that point. We've had that commission of inquiry, the Galema Motlandi Commission of Inquiry. We know the findings that came from that. Even ED himself accepted and acknowledged the findings of that commission of inquiry. But there's been the recommendations haven't been taken up by the state. We also know that since the 2013 constitution was promulgated, ED and his regime has steadfastly refused to implement the relevant constitutional reforms and allow alignment of statutes with the constitution. We've seen you, Hopewell, incarcerated. Now we've seen Jacob Ngaruvime with you as well, and now we see Sikhala and the 16, the Nyatsime 16, and there is a clear pattern in that behavior. We've seen, obviously, we know the Sicilia situation and the other three, CCC legislators. So it is clear that the regime thrives on picking individuals of a certain level of profile, and we've got Titi's situation as well as we speak, and using those individuals as an example, as a chilling example of the price of dissent. Now, what that does is that it sends that chilling message, and